On a chilly early winter morning at a modest roadside spot called Holly's Diner, just off the interstate, Lena Ray, 26, handled the early shift each day. She always arrived first, personally cleaning the tables, switching on the warmers, and going over receipts before anyone else showed up. Despite a tough life, a mother battling osteoporosis and barely scraping by, Lena held on to a gentle kindness that never faded, no matter how hard things got. A peculiar man named John, seemingly around 60, always sat in the back corner booth every morning. Nobody around town knew who he was or where he came from. He always wore the same worn-out coat with frayed cuffs, kept his eyes lowered to the tabletop, and drank his coffee black. No sugar, no cream. He never initiated conversation, yet when Lena set down his cup, he'd respond with a faint nod. Once, during a busy morning, Lena accidentally left a handkerchief on his table while clearing dishes. The next morning, it was sitting neatly folded on a bread plate. No words, just a quiet show of respect. Other customers would often whisper behind menus, "He's not normal. Those eyes have seen things, probably done time." Lena would always respond softly but firmly, "I believe he used to be a good man." That particular morning, 2 officers came in, their expressions serious, moving quickly across the cracked linoleum floor. They headed straight for John. "Sir, we need to see your ID," one said. John slowly reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver metal piece. An old military dog tag, edges worn smooth. "That's not proper identification," one officer said sharply. "We need government-issued ID." Lena stepped out from behind the counter, her voice steady though soft. "He's here every day. He's never caused trouble." They turned to her with cold, questioning stares. "Are you interfering with the police investigation, miss?" The diner went quiet. No one spoke. Eyes dropped, shoulders tensed in silence. Lena hesitated but didn't back down. "You can't just take him away like that." After a few tense moments, they stood John up and walked him out. As he left, he looked back at Lena. Their eyes met, and he gave her a deliberate, steady nod. No one in that room could have predicted that simple gesture would shake the entire town just one day later. What was in his eyes at that moment? Something unspoken. Perhaps regret, depth, or farewell. Who was he really? A veteran? A witness? A ghost? That same day, Lena got called into the manager's office mid-shift. Mr. Halley, the owner's son, leaned against his desk with folded arms and a deep frown. "Lena, I know you meant well, but you're scaring customers. When police show up and you step in, it reflects badly on the diner. We can't afford that kind of attention right now." Lena bowed her head, saying nothing in her defense, her hands nervously twisting her apron. She knew the diner couldn't afford to lose regulars, not with how bad business had become. "I understand," she murmured, even though her heart told her otherwise. "Good. And remember, your position isn't guaranteed. A lot of folks are looking for jobs these days." By late afternoon, word had spread through the small town. Authorities were seeking a suspect in connection with a military storage robbery, matching John's description. The local radio gave a warning. A man in his 60s, military past, possibly dangerous. Residents were advised to report any sightings. The town buzzed with rumors. Some even came to Holly's Diner just to ask, where exactly did he sit? Or did he ever mention weapons? They ordered the least expensive coffee while subtly probing for details, leaving tiny tips. Lena grew more uneasy as her shift dragged on. Had she made a mistake in speaking up? Had she defended someone unworthy? Doubt crept in like the cold air slipping through the back door. Later that night, just before closing, when the diner was nearly deserted, a peculiar man arrived dressed in crisp civilian attire but carrying a soldier's demeanor. He sat squarely in John's usual booth. He didn't place an order, just stared out the window into the dim parking lot, then spoke softly as Lena approached with a menu. Some burdens weigh heavier than war zones. Not all warriors wear uniforms forever. Before departing, he left a folded note beneath his untouched water glass. After he exited, Lena unfolded it. Inside was a worn photograph of a military unit in desert uniforms. John stood centered, wearing decorated medals and the bearing of a commander. A faint spark of hope returned to Lena. Perhaps he wasn't who people assumed. Maybe there was more to his past than anyone realized. But just as she was about to inform her manager of what she'd discovered, she was summoned to the back office and handed a 1-week unpaid suspension for interfering in an active investigation and possibly aiding a person of concern. Back at her small apartment where her mother awaited answers, Lena wept quietly in her bedroom, the old photo clenched in her hand. What no one at the diner knew was that same night, a confidential meeting took place at a military facility just 10 miles away, John's personnel file laid open before multiple senior officers. The next morning, though officially suspended, Lena showed up to help in the short-staffed kitchen. While she cleaned quietly, strange sounds began to rise outside. The deep rumble of engines broke the morning stillness. She rushed to the front windows. The street outside the diner was packed with military trucks, olive green and shining in the early light. 5 army jeeps were parked in perfect formation. People from nearby shops gathered to watch. Locals halted on sidewalks, raising phones to record the commotion. From the vehicles stepped 5 uniformed officers, led by a distinguished colonel, with an impressive array of ribbons on his chest. He entered first, the bell over the door jingling. The breakfast crowd froze. Forks halted mid-bite. He nodded respectfully to the room, then asked clearly, "Which one of you is Lena Ray?" She stepped out timidly from the kitchen, apron dusted in flour. Her manager, the same one who'd suspended her, stood still behind the counter, stunned. Here, the colonel placed a small wooden case on the closest table. Its polished lid gleamed under the lights. "You should have this," the colonel said, voice surprisingly warm. Inside lay John's Silver Star, one of the military's highest awards for bravery, alongside a handwritten letter on official army paper. Penned in a shaky but deliberate hand, the letter expressed John's gratitude to Lena for restoring his dwindling belief in human decency. He revealed he had once served as a sergeant who saved an entire unit from an ambush in Iraq in 2004, dragging 3 wounded men to safety under enemy fire. But after being honorably discharged following a severe brain injury, he'd been forgotten. Civilian life had been cruel. For years, he had lived in shadows, alone and plagued by nightmares. At one point, he nearly ended his life. But Lena's quiet compassion, the way she greeted him daily with kindness while others judged him, gave him a reason to return. Her simple good morning became his lifeline. Sometimes, the letter read, salvation arrives in the form of coffee served with sincere kindness. The colonel turned back to Lena, standing tall, and delivered a crisp salute, one usually reserved for fellow officers. The entire diner sat stunned. Even the kitchen crew came out to witness it. Then he announced, voice strong and clear, "From this moment on, the United States Army recognizes you as an honorary member of our ranks, Miss Ray. What you showed was the bravery we aim to instill in every soldier, the strength to stand alone for what's right." Another officer came forward, presenting a modest medallion on a ribbon. "This is from John's unit. He wanted you to have it." The patrons, those who had ridiculed Lena just the day before or whispered about John, remained utterly silent. One man took off his hat, holding it to his chest. Another looked away, discreetly wiping his eyes. Mr. Halley, the manager, stared down at the floor, the weight of his rushed judgment heavy on his shoulders. Lena didn't shed a tear, though emotion shimmered in her eyes. She merely nodded, receiving the honor with the same quiet grace she had always shown. This time it was she who returned the gesture of respect. "Where is he now?" she asked at last. "Safe," the colonel replied, and remembered. Do you believe a small act of kindness can change a life's path? If yes, write yes in the comments or share a story when someone helped you in silence. It turned out John was not the suspect the police had been seeking. He had been misidentified because of a blurry security camera image and his quiet, withdrawn nature. The actual suspect had been caught 50 miles away. John's full name was John Mercer, Sergeant First Class, retired, recipient of several honors long forgotten by all but military archives. His brave actions during a 2004 ambush had saved 23 lives, but a brain injury from that event left him with speech issues and anxiety that drove his reclusive life. And astonishingly, Lena's defense of him, witnessed by a nearby diner guest who was a retired military chaplain, led the Veterans Affairs Department to uncover John's true identity. He was a decorated war hero who had slipped through the cracks of the system and lost contact for nearly 8 years. "We've been searching for him," the colonel later explained, "to give him an overdue honor and make sure he gets proper treatment. Your diner," he added, "was the only place he felt safe enough to visit often." Lena's story soon spread beyond the town, first local papers, then regional broadcasts. Many came not just to eat, but to meet the waitress who defended a forgotten hero when no one else would. Business surged. Mr. Halley quietly made Lena head waitress and increased her pay. John's old booth now displayed a brass plaque, reserved for those who served. Veterans began to gather there, find companionship in a place that once held only silence. One day, a small girl with pigtails tugged at her mother's arm as Lena refilled their water glasses. "Mom, I want to work here when I grow up." Lena crouched to the child's level and smiled. "You don't need to work here, sweetheart. Just be kind. That's enough. Kindness can save someone when you least expect it." The manager who once suspended her approached her later, his former pride replaced by heartfelt remorse. "I was wrong, Lena. I was thinking of profits when I should have been thinking of people." He laid a formal letter on the table, naming her as the permanent head waitress with the power to train new staff. The final image: Lena wiping tables at the end of a shift, sunlight pouring through the windows, catching John's medal, now displayed in a case by the register, gleaming like a promise. A promise that even the smallest acts of goodness matter more than we know. Today's society too often judges people by how they look or how little they speak. But sometimes those we overlook carry invisible honors and heavy burdens we can't imagine. That dog tag Lena had once seen in John's worn hand wasn't proof of guilt, but a symbol of sacrifice and lost valor that should never be forgotten. She hadn't just stood up for a silent man. She stood for what was right even when no one else would. A single voice, soft yet unwavering, is stronger than fear or conformity. And now others in this town have begun walking toward that same light, realizing that courage wears many forms, even that of a waitress's apron. If you believe that every small kindness deserves to be seen and remembered, stay with us. We share stories of ordinary people doing the extraordinary. "Sir, we need to see your ID, now." 2 officers stood over a quiet man sipping coffee in the corner booth. When he slowly raised a dented dog tag instead of identification, the whole diner went silent. Only the young waitress stepped forward and said, "He comes here every morning. He's done nothing wrong." They threatened her with arrest for getting in the way while other patrons avoided her gaze. But the next morning, 5 military jeeps pulled into the lot. Who had she really stood up for? And why had the army come for her?